you're not your work, you're you, right? So trying to create your own identity by making time and carving out time for yourself.
Rosy, thanks for coming today. Just by way of introduction, this is Rosy from Mindschool. Recently, you came in and did a 6-week workshop around mindfulness, and it wasn't really something that I knew a lot about. We've had amazing results for both me personally and the crew around mindfulness and mental health, and a huge increase in understanding of it, and it's given us some amazing tools to work forwards with. It's been a real revelation, and I think it's something that your message needs to go further, which is why we're doing this video, so that other people maybe in my position can help their staff, can help their colleagues make all of this a much more normal conversation. We've got loads of questions that we've both written down for each other.
Yep.
And so we'll get started.
Great, thanks Glenn. Well, thanks for having me. So we'll just get started, really crack into it. Why is mental health so important in the real estate industry?
Because I think the best way would be to put it is that success is not going to be very long lasting without you mentally thriving. It's a high stress industry, and it's a high output industry, and it's big on burnout.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the tools to cope, success is going to be fleeting.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. And at the moment, with the current climate around mental health in the real estate industry, what do you see, or what have you noticed in this industry in terms of lack of resources, lack of tools, education, awareness?
Lack of visibility. I don't think it exists. I think it's something that's kind of fringe and not really spoken about, or when it is spoken about, it's kind of, we should do something. I just don't think there's not a lot of knowledge around it.
Yeah.
And I was guilty of that myself. There was not a lot of knowledge, not knowing what to do. So I made it easy on myself and hired you.
Yeah. Can you share your own experience with mental health struggles, or mental health or mental wellness in general?
For me, it was not having the tools to deal with things and the tools to manage my emotions. And so everybody has things that go wrong in their life or that stress them out. I just wasn't particularly good at dealing with it. Things that were quite stressful would put me into a spin and take me days to recover from. Whereas with the improvements I made, the same things can still happen. And I'll still take a backward step, but we're talking 15 minutes or half an hour. And you're recovered and you're ready and you're back in the game.
Yeah.
Sometimes minutes, sometimes seconds. And I'm getting fitter and stronger at it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then in terms of management or leadership, what role do you think managers play or leaders play in supporting the well-being of their people, or helping to make a change?
Well, I guess firstly make it available. So
Yeah.
hiring you was a good start, like I said before, because I didn't have to actually know anything.
Yeah.
I just,
Put me on the stage.
booked you for a 6-week session with the crew. And having you do those sessions has certainly made it available, but it's also started the conversation within the crew. And a lot of them are talking to each other, and now they're willing to more share openly with each other about their own struggles. I think the second thing from a manager's point of view, though, is to notice, and whether it's through your one-on-ones with the staff, or whether it's general eavesdropping as you're walking around the place, but just to notice what's going on for people. And I'm now far more aware of what I'm looking for.
And I've seen that, in the last few months that we've been working together, and even during the workshops, I've seen that you do that as a manager as well, which is really admirable and really awesome to see, is you notice the shifts in your staff, or you notice when people are struggling and you help to try and counteract that or give them the tools as well, which we want to see from managers in general, really. What else have you done or are doing or wanting to do with your staff?
Well, we take, the easy option is we're getting you back for
Yep.
follow-up, so that's going to be, I think we've organised quarterly.
Yeah.
That's in itself going to generate more discussions. Once those conversations start to happen more freely, as they already have, but now that those conversations are happening more freely, then the visibility of any mental health issues just becomes more visible to each other. And like I said, managers need to notice.
And like we've discussed before, just trying to normalise it as well, and also that piece about not a band-aid, not just slapping a band-aid on it and saying here you go, then walking away. It needs to be sustainable. If the success is to be sustainable, then these preventatives or solutions also need to be sustainable, like you say.
Yep.
What's your advice to people wanting to get into the real estate industry in terms of how can they be successful, make profits or whatever it is, but while also trying to protect their mental well-being in a really busy or cutthroat industry?
You know, this is a high pressure industry where the hours can be really, really long.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Nothing great was ever built on 40 hours a week. However, you've got to be able to work really hard and be present while you're in it, and then have the tools in place so that you can switch off when you're not in it. Otherwise, it's all consuming, and there's plenty of real estate salespeople, including myself, who woke up thinking about it and went to bed thinking about it 24/7, and that's not healthy.
Yeah, it sort of becomes all-consuming, right? And I guess that leads to the next question is that hustle culture, is that busyness, is that status symbol that you wear as a badge when you're busy? And so how can we start to break down some of that hustle culture or remove some of our values around that, or, you know, this hustle that we're striving for, but that's not necessarily healthy?
That's a really, really important question, because, you know, I just finished saying nothing great was ever built on 40 hours a week. And it is the kind of business that people get into because they want to change their life, change their family's life. They want to achieve something amazing, and this is an industry that you can do that. But when it becomes all consuming, it's also an industry that you can get completely lost in.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of real estate agents who've been doing it for 10 years who are rich, overweight and unhealthy.
And divorced.
And divorced, yes. That's probably one of the biggest questions of the whole industry. Is you don't want to damage the hustle culture in terms of people's work ethic. So it just comes down to doing it better. For example, there are people within my own organisation at similar levels of performance, but everybody handles things differently. One has plenty of time with the phone switched off, completely present with whatever personal stuff they're doing, and others, phone never switched off, not present with personal stuff they're doing.
Yeah.
And yet we've got very similar results. So it's really about having the tools so that you can be present when you're at work like a dog, but present when you're not at work.
Yeah.
Present in whatever else you should be doing. That's going to give you that mental balance.
Yeah.
So that you don't end up burnt out.
Exactly, and that's a great answer, and it all comes down to balance and having tools and sustainability as well. So is there anything else that you want to add or want to say in terms of mental well-being or mental health or your own mental health or the industry in general?
Only that it's had a huge difference in the way I'm able to operate.
Yeah.
I'm now far more present at work. I'm not drifting off and being as unfocused as I was, and I'm far more present when I'm not at work.
Yeah.
Some of the practices, like you said, is like going to the gym.
Yeah.
Have resulted unexpectedly, because I really didn't think it was going to work, have resulted in me being just more focused at work, but more focused not at work. And so same as for the salespeople, it's really giving me, I'm achieving more, but I'm not having to do 90 hours a week to achieve it.
Yeah, so that working smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah, it's an old cliche, but
it is.
It's amazing what you can get done in a week.
For sure.
If you are 100% focused and present.
Absolutely, and it's awesome to see that already, you know, those huge changes that are taking place in your life as well.
Yeah, and you still drift off, but you teaching me when you drift off, it's okay.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up about it. Just come back. But just the exercise of bringing yourself back into focus.
Yeah.
Just doing that, you just eventually stop drifting off.
Yeah, exactly. It just gets easier over time.
That's my favourite bit because I'm getting a lot more done.
Good. I'm glad. So pleased to hear that.
How did you get into doing what you're doing?
I originally came from a corporate background, so I studied marketing and communications at university, and I was working in advertising at the time where I had a really long period of, you know, at least 2 years of suffering from really bad depression and anxiety, to the point where it was so bad I couldn't work anymore. So essentially I took a year off just to focus on my mental health and myself and getting well again. And during that year, you know, I had lots and lots of different tools that were available to me, but one of the most powerful tools and the most sustainable tool to this day was mindfulness, and the knowledge and the wisdom that I learnt through practicing mindfulness, through training in VSR courses, had such a profound truly, I don't like the word life-changing, but it was effect on my life. So essentially I left the corporate world and now I work on the other side with corporates, teaching them mind health tools and talking about mental health and giving that awareness and the education around that area. And I also work for a not-for-profit called Pause, Breathe, Smile, training teachers in schools as well about mental health.
One that I know there'll be employers and business owners and managers watching this that are probably not going to want to hear is, what is the importance of taking mental health days at work?
A mental health day is no less important than taking a physical health day. There's been statistics done on mental health days and the importance of them and the impact of them. And there was a study that was done that over 44% of the respondents in the study had never taken a mental health day, but 66% of people said they wanted to take a mental health day. And of that, 27% of people had lied about taking a mental health day. And that is a really important piece to recognise there, is that if you're having to lie about taking a mental health day, you're feeding into this whole beast of stigma and shame attached to mental illness. So if your workplace is not encouraging mental health days or speaking openly about mental health exactly the same as you would physical health, then you're not doing anything to help change, there's this discrimination as well and that we're faced with mental health in this country.
I think there's going to be a fairly large challenge there with some business owners, managers, because just the thought of saying it's okay to take mental health days conjures up images of people taking the mickey. Just being able to say, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm not coming in today. The concern of abuse around that.
Yeah.
And I think the other concern would be, I don't know that as a leader, I'm ready to phone my staff in the morning and say, I'm feeling overwhelmed and anxious today. I'm not coming in, because I would feel like I was letting them down, like I was soft. Despite all the work we've done, I don't think I'm ready for that. So we've got some challenges to overcome.
Absolutely. And it's not something that comes overnight. Saying, well, just say you're taking a mental health day. That's hard, right? And again, it's hard because...
If you said that to me, I would assume that you were using that as code for, I'm going to the beach.
I mean, I guess there's two parts to that. The first part is that needs to come from the top. That needs to come from leaders. When you first start a job, or implementing that or expressing that to your whole team and saying, at this company, we encourage mental health days. If you're struggling, we want you to talk to us. If you need a mental health day, please take one, no questions asked. We trust that if you're not feeling well mentally, we want to give you that space to help support that, And then, a good manager will say, that's fine, I really appreciate you taking a mental health day. Maybe when you come in tomorrow, we can have a chat about how I can help. So again, I think that's something that comes structurally from an organisation, because it is difficult for one person just to say, I'm taking a mental health day, if the whole organisation isn't on board with that. And to the other piece, of course, it's hard to say, hey, I'm taking a mental health day. And again, I think that just comes with time. And if you're working in an organisation that normalises mental health, which hopefully we're trying to push people to start doing, then you'll feel more empowered and you'll feel more safe and comfortable to be able to express that and be open about that. And I think as soon as you do that, it's very liberating and you're being part of the solution as opposed to the problem.
And from a business owner's point of view, it's going to involve a fair amount of trusting the process, if you like, of happy, thriving people get more work done.
Yeah.
And so don't fear it. To a lot of us, it's what we can't see, we don't understand.
Exactly.
So you've got a broken leg, fair enough, mate. You're feeling anxious, toughen up, cupcake. We've got work to do.
Yep.
And that is an attitude that's prevailing.
Exactly, and I think that's part of our culture as a country, and that's part of our work culture as well. And we need to shift, and we will shift. And the more organisations that normalise this kind of initiative, or just taking mental health days, the more the others are going to follow suit. So I think as an organisation, it's about, one, being a leader and forging change, and also setting an example for other workplace that you are socially responsible and you do care about your people, and you are trying to be part of the solution as opposed to the problem. And the idea behind it is that, hopefully that creates a ripple effect, because you only need to help one person, and then hopefully that can spread to other people as well.
What changes have you seen in the organisations that you've worked with?
So I've seen, great deal of change collectively as organisations, you know, management teams and leadership teams noticing huge shifts in their people, and also individuals as well. So a lot of the time after my workshops, individuals will come up to me, you know, often in tears, crying, saying, you know, thank you so much for sharing your story, and then they will share their story with me, and they're so vulnerable and they're so open, and seeing that is really, really heartwarming, and it's really encouraging to see that, you know, just by me opening up, it leaves space and room for other people to also feel like they can be vulnerable and open up. I've had a client who, one of the individuals that attended my workshops, gave some feedback that they had been struggling with mental illness since they were 14, and they came to the 6-week workshop series, and they said it just gave them so many different tools that was really able to help support their mental health, which was a really encouraging and awesome positive bit of feedback to get, but also highlights that just this 6-week period had such an impact. Since this person was 14, they may have not had those tools, which probably highlights a bit of the issue.
Highlights what's missing. I know you've had based on what you just said, the amount of people that you've helped in your workshops had a huge effect on our team. We've had so much positive feedback, myself personally as well. I'm very grateful for what I've been able to learn and what I've been able to put into practice. If there was one message you could leave people with that you wanted them to know about mental health, what would it be? Getting
people to try and just take a step back and get some perspective of their work, and just realise that work's not the most important thing. It's important, and it's one very important part, but it's only a part. So try not to get so caught up in it that you're absolutely killing yourself in the process. I think the second thing is to not be afraid to talk, and I know that's much easier said than done, but if you can just open up to one person, you know, and if someone says, how are you? Often we say, yeah, good, but that's a lie. It's one of the most common lies we tell. So if we can just try to be more open with ourselves and more open with other people, and just say, well, I'm actually not great, I'm not doing so well, that's fine, right? It's okay to not be okay. So trying, if you can, to be open and to normalize your own mental health and know that it's okay, and we all go through it and it's normal.
In your opinion, what's the current climate around mental health in New Zealand at the moment?
Yeah, it's really poor. New Zealand has got some of the worst suicide statistics in the world per capita, and you know, the research shows that around each year is 600 plus suicides, which is really bad and really sad and not something that we want to be seeing. And it's sort of in this country in particular, with very stoic and staunch Kiwis, particularly men, it's a silent epidemic essentially. It's not spoken about a lot. There's a lot of shame and stigma and misunderstanding attached to mental illness, and so there are a lot of people suffering in silence, which really feeds into the whole issue of it. And there's also a lack of education and awareness and understanding, but in addition to that, there's a lack of action. So we've come a really long way, this country, in terms of improving our mental well-being, but we're very, very far away than where we should be, because there's only so much education or awareness you can give until you actually need to say, we need to be taking this seriously now, and we need to be taking actions. Your mental health is your most important asset, and I think people forget that. People tend to get really caught up in their lives or their work or whatever it is, or even focusing so much on their physical health that they forget about their mental health. And we need to understand and realize that if you don't have your health, in particular your mental health, then nothing else is going to work. You know, it doesn't matter how successful you are, how much money you've got on your bank account. None of that matters if you're not happy.
I think that's a really good point, because for years we've heard people say, if you don't have your health, you've got nothing. But I think for a lot of people, including me, no one's ever really stopped to think that includes mental health.
Yeah.
I just never really thought about it.
Yeah.
It means don't smoke cigarettes, drink too much alcohol, and eat too many pies, because you'll get sick. But you know, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
For sure.
We really need to include mental health in that.
Yeah, and that's why, and that comes into that whole, there's a huge separation, and between physical health and mental health, and we don't treat them the same. We don't look at them the same. So we need to try and balance that out and treat them as exactly the same, because that's what they are. And I would argue that actually mental health they go hand in hand, but I would argue that mental health probably is the most important.
Why should we be taking it in the workplace so seriously?
I think a really important reason, something that businesses need to understand, is that it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And not only for supporting the well-being of your people, but also it's actually a really effective strategy for profit and for business growth. So if you think about it, happy workers and healthy workers are more resilient. They're able to cope with the ups and downs of life. Therefore, they can perform at their optimum. Therefore, your business can perform at its optimum. And there's a lot of research and studies done on mental well-being in the workplace that shows that, happy workers are more productive, they're more focused, they're more creative, they're more innovative. So if you look at all of these positive impacts that well-being practices are having on people, you can see how that has a huge ripple effect for your business and really using that as an asset. The second part is recruitment and retention as well of your staff. At the moment, obviously, a lot of businesses are struggling to retain staff, right? Employee retention is really important. And what we're also seeing and looking at is that where businesses are actually hiring younger and younger, so we're moving into hiring the millennials and even the Gen Zs. So the way that we position ourselves as an organisation needs to change. So people now don't just want a job, they want a culture, and they want a workplace where they feel supported and they feel that they can have that work-life balance. So in order to appeal to those, to that demographic, you need to be shifting as an organisation, and companies need to be changing with the times. Again, otherwise you're falling behind. So it's going to be much harder to retain staff and recruit new staff in the first place. Lastly, this is a really important one that people don't necessarily know or take seriously, is that it's the law to protect the mental well-being of your people, right? It's the law to protect your employees physically, but also mentally. And a lot of organisations don't know that or don't understand it. And it is a responsibility of leaders and of an organisation to do that. And I was saying before that I spoke with a client the other day and I asked them, what are you doing at the moment? What sort of practices or strategies do you have in place to support the well-being of your people? And they just said, nothing, which feels quite shocking to me, because again, that is the biggest problem that we're seeing in workplaces. It's not people breaking their arms, it's people struggling with their mental health. And if you don't have any support, then you're not necessarily actually following the guidelines or your legal obligations to protect your people.
So is there any notable companies that we would have heard of that are doing this en masse?
I mean, so many companies, huge companies around the world are way ahead of the game when it comes to wellbeing practices. Apple, the huge ones, Apple, LinkedIn, Nike, Harvard Business, Xero, all of these big, really successful companies have got into their strategy, written into their legal documents or in people's contracts, is wellness support. And Google, for example, they have a CEO of happiness. Obviously that's taking it to another level, but we're seeing companies that are really successful and they understand that this stuff isn't a buzzword, it's not a fad, it's not woo-woo, it's something that's a must-have in order for your business to thrive at the end of the day.
Busy has become a status symbol, which you've already mentioned. How do we shift that culture?
I think it's tricky because it's really ingrained not only just in the workplace, it's ingrained in this country, right? The whole culture in New Zealand around work. So in this country, we often, we'll live to work, as opposed to other countries such as they work to live.
Soft.
And some may say that, but then you ask who's happier, right? Look at the statistics, right? 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people in the workplace in New Zealand will suffer from ill mental health. almost 50% of New Zealanders will suffer from ill mental health in their lives. So we need, and obviously there's lots of different contributing factors, but if we're looking at in terms of the way that we work in this country is we work really hard, and that's great and that's amazing, and we're very well known for our strong work ethic, but often it's to a fault, right? And it's to the detriment of our own mental health. So you can work hard, but if that is sacrificing your mental health at the same time, then that's not success really, in my opinion, right? Like I said, if you're not happy, then who cares if you're busy or you're doing really well in your job? None of that stuff matters. So I think it's really important to, like I said, normalize mental health, normalize taking mental health days off at work. Don't reward unhealthy behavior in the workplace. I was saying before, an example, when I used to work in advertising, we had a sort of a organisation meeting one morning, and one of my colleagues who had stayed up till like midnight and flicked off some emails, my manager congratulated him and gave him a round of applause in the team meeting for staying up late and sending an email at 12:30 at night. So he was rewarded for, I would say, not healthy behaviour. Yes, 100% there's times that are going to be busy and you need to work really long hours, but I don't think that's sustainable.
But management doesn't need to be establishing that as a culture.
100%, and they don't need to be rewarding that, because then people feel that they need to be doing that. And again, it just feeds into
Getting
the whole...
one job out is different to making that a permanent thing.
Exactly. There's going to be projects that require that, and that's fine, but I don't think to glamorise that and to reward that as an industry, I think that's really toxic, and that's feeding into the whole problem.
Why the real estate industry in particular? Why does the real estate industry in particular need to do this?
I mean, the real estate industry is one that is stressful by nature and busy by nature. It's a job or an industry where you're constantly available. The lines between work life and home life are blurred, and very much so in this current environment. You're always on your phone, you take your work home with you, you're working on weekends. So that in itself can be quite damaging. It's also an industry where success, the measure of success is clearly defined, by sales, by figures, by profits. And we can get really caught up in that. It's quite competitive. It's really easy to become your job. And I think the nature of something that is based on sales as well can be quite, I don't want to say addictive, but it is. You can get really hooked into that grind, and that's just the nature of the industry. And some of the statistics show that around 74 or 75, this is pre-pandemic, % of real estate agents really struggle with work-life balance. So it's huge numbers, and so that's why it's a hugely important part of this industry to implement wellbeing practices of some sort.
Using specific examples, how can we tackle some of these issues?
Do what works for you, first of all. So if you're implementing changes, do what works for you. I'm not asking you to get up in the morning and run at 5:30 a.m, then meditate for 20 minutes, then journal, and then get to work, right? It's got to be doable, and you've got to want to enjoy it, as opposed to just adding something else to your to-do list. Setting boundaries with yourself, enforcing your own work hours, right? When I'm at home during this time, I'm turning off my phone and being present with whatever I'm doing. Setting meetings with yourself is quite a good one. So just as you'd set a meeting with a colleague or a client, book out in your calendar 30 minutes or even 15 minutes in your day that's just for you, to do something that supports your well-being beyond work, right? So trying to create that distance between the workplace and yourself, because you're not your work, you're you, right? So trying to create your own identity by making time and carving out time for yourself, and talking to people as well, I think is really important, because you'll be surprised at how many people, your colleagues, your peers, are actually going through some of the same issues that you're going through. So I think conversation can be a really great place to start as well. And then also, really importantly, investing in yourself and investing in mind health tools, such as workshop or such as your own personal development, to build that resilience. Because as I said, life is hard, work is hard. There's always something going on. There's always ups and downs. And if you don't have tools in your toolkit then it's going to be a real struggle for you. So investing in yourself and investing in your business and equipping yourself with tools and knowledge is going to make all the difference to your mental health and your physical health, in work and life and everything.
What about practicing mindfulness in the workplace and at home?
Yeah.
How can we actually start practicing it?
The breath is a really powerful tool that's always readily available to you to tune into, to help focus your attention, but also help to down-regulate your nervous system. So to touch briefly, we have a nerve in our bellies called the vagus nerve.
My favourite nerve.
Your favourite nerve?
Yeah.
You've had a lot of experience with helping to support this nerve.
Now I have.
Yeah. So you'll relate to this deep belly breathing, but essentially there's a nerve in your belly called the vagus nerve, and this nerve travels all the way up through your central nervous system and into your brain. When we take deep belly breaths, as opposed to breathing up into our shoulders, which a lot of us do, we stimulate this nerve and we breathe into our diaphragm. And when we stimulate this nerve, it sends a signal up to our brain, which triggers the relaxation response and down-regulates our whole nervous system and any heightened emotions. So just simply by taking some deep belly breaths has a huge impact on your physical state, your emotional state, your cortisol levels, all of these things that start to, stress starts to compound on top of itself. So if you can, one simple way that you can help to stop that stress or that overwhelm from building is just to punctuate your day with some deep belly breaths. So setting a timer on your phone or on your computer every hour just to stop and take 10 deep belly breaths is just a really simple first step that you can take to help to lower all of these micro stresses that are a part of life.
Now, the first time I heard you say that, I really just went, whatever. Having practiced it again and again and again,
yeah,
it's had quite a profound effect. And literally, putting your hands here to practice it when you first start, so that you can focus on pushing out the belly as you breathe in to fill that up. Putting your hand here was really, really useful. And focusing on that and doing it, massive effect. And then I had this weird moment where I went, isn't that what you do for a hysterical child? Just tell them to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And you're rubbing their back and tell them to breathe deeply, just breathe, just breathe, just breathe. Mm-hmm. And so it makes a lot of sense, but at the start I was like, this is not going to help me at all.
For sure. Yeah.
I was probably stressed and tensed at the same time, going, this is not going to help.
Yeah. And that's awesome to see. And I think, when you say to people, the breath, it sounds like, what? How can the breath help me? But I think when you explain the science behind it, and it's a simple tool, it's always there, your breath is always there. And if you can start to implement that or get into the habit of doing that, it's going to make such a difference.